Today's daf is daf Chaf. We'll start with the Mishnah. Achalo nimchaka Megillah, before they erase the Megillah by putting it into the Mayim, Amra, she declared any shosa, I don't want to drink. And she has the rights to back out of Hashkas Sotah. And therefore, the question is, they wrote the Megillah, and it has the Shem Hashem in it. What do we do with the Megillah? Megillah son nignezes. Now, here we have to add a few points. Number one, Tosfos quotes Yerushalmi that nignezes means it's hidden away under the Heichal, under the Tzidei HaHeichal. And the Yerushalmi explains that the reason for this is because by putting it under the sort of the door or the opening of the Heichal, the gate of the Heichal, then when people open the door, it's going to cause shchika. It's going to sort of obliterate the Sefer. So the super commentaries on the Yerushalmi are worried about the Isur Lav of V'ibadatem Eshmam Lo Tasun Kain L'Hashem Elokeichem, a lav of Mechikas Hashem. And therefore, by placing the Megillah underneath the door, they are really violating this law. And it's like Ma'abid Hashem b'yadayim. And how much more so when you talk about the people who are going to open the door, and by opening, they are doing a Mechika b'yadayim. And the answer seems to be that the Yerushalmi holds there's no Isa Mechika on Kisvei HaKodesh if those Kisvei HaKodesh have no purpose. So here the Megillah was written for the purpose of Hashkah, and now she says Eni Shosa, and therefore it has no purpose, and there's no Isa Mechikas Hashem. However, the Ein Yitzchak, I think that's Rabbi Yitzchak Chanan, he gives a different answer, that the Kohen writes the Megillah with a Tanai. And that is that if the Shem is going to be used for Hashkah, then he's being Makadish the Shem. But if she will not drink, then he's not Makadish the Shem. And that was his Tanai. The Mishnah continues, Uminchasa mispazeres al adeshen. Now, what do we do with the Karban Mincha? The Karban Mincha is part of the Maaseh of the Sotah, and here there won't be any Hashkah. So therefore the Mincha is burnt, and Shiyu mefazeres ha-mincha gabi adeshen, and they pour the Mincha over the Deshen where there's an Eish, and that's the din, or shall we say an application of the general din, that Kodshei Kodshim Shenifsalu are burnt on the Deshen, on the base, in the base of Deshen. So this Mincha that was already subject to Kiddush B'Kli Shares now becomes Psulei Kodshei Kodshim. Now the Mishnah addresses a different question. Okay, we cannot use this Megillah for this particular Sotah because she declared Eni Shosa, but can we use the Megillah for another Sotah? Ein Megillah Ksher Lahashkas Ba Sotah Acheres. So this Mishnah reflects the Shita, which we'll see is Machlokas Tanoim, that Megillah's Sotah has to be written Lishma, for the sake of this particular Sotah. Nimchaka Megillah v'Omra Tmeani, if after they put the Megillah into the Mayim and they obliterated the shame, now she confesses her crime of adultery, Hamayim Nishpachim, the Mayim are spilled out, even though they have within them the Megillah with the shame, because the Mayim were designated for the purpose of clarifying this doubt as to whether or not she became Tmei and she was guilty. And she now removes that doubt from us by confessing her crime. and there's no din of hashka. And therefore, even though the mayim have within them the mechikas hamegila, but nevertheless they could be thrown out. And there's no kedusha in the mayim because the entire kedusha here is for the purpose of biras safek. Now that she confesses the crime, then there's no kedusha in the mayim because the mayim is no longer designated to be mavar the safek. Umin chasam is pazeres al beis hadesh. Nimchaka megila v'amra eni shosa. Until now, we discussed the case where before the mechika of the Megillah and the obliteration of the Shem Hashem, she declared she doesn't drink, and there was a hodah. But now we're talking about a case where she comes forward and says Eini Shosa after the mechikas HaMegillah. So we've already obliterated the name Hashem because we want her to drink and clarify the suffix. She refuses. Now, it's not that she confesses, but rather she still insists on her innocence, but she doesn't want to drink. In such a case, we could force her to drink. Why? Because that's the parish of Sotah, to be mavar the safek, and we don't know whether her insisting that she's guiltless is truth or not truth. So ma'ararin osa, we open up her mouth, and we learned yesterday that we put a piece of metal in her mouth in such a way, mashkin osa bal karcha, that we pour the mayim morim against her will into her mouth. And the reason for this is, again, because the suffix has still not been clarified, and we do believe the possibility that she is innocent. And the reason why she doesn't want to drink is because of pachad. Now, what happens to her body physically after she drinks, if indeed she's guilty? Eino maspekas lishos. Immediately after she drinks the mei merorim, ad shepanemo rikos, her face turns green, ve'neh boltos, and her eyes begin to bulge, vehi mismales gidin, and the various sinews that make up the cheeks begin to get blown up, and it looks like she's just full of these vessels, these gidin. Her basar, her flesh, becomes like lines and lines of blown up flesh. Vehem omrim, and immediately the kohanim realize she's about to die. Hotziua, take her out of this area, which is kodesh. Shelo titame hazara, because her dead body would be mitame the azara. The Shara Nikanor is where they entered into the azara. If yesh la zchus, the Mishnah continues, she would be able to survive because of this chus. The Gemara later on is going to clarify exactly what this chus is. And as long as up to 3 years, she might still survive. And the Gemara is going to try to figure out which Tana this is, because all the Tanoim seems to assume that she can only get a Schus Tola up to and not beyond 1 year. Mikan Omer Ben Azai Chayiv Hadon Lamed Es Pito Torah. Ben Azai is in favor of teaching a girl Torah. She'im Tishteh Teidesh Aschus Tola. In other words, her Torah study will be a schus and prevent her immediate death if, heaven forbid, she was guilty of adultery and she drank from the Meimorah. And the explanation of Ben Azai is that the mitzvah of Sotah we derive from the fact that the Torah gave us a mitzvah that one should learn Torah, and that applies not only to men, but also to women as well. And in the case of women, Ben Azai is of the opinion that the purpose of teaching a Torah is to create a schus for her. We're going to see that Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yeshua disagree with Ben Azai. They hold that we should not be teaching a Torah. Nevertheless, they agree that in event that she did study Torah, then she would have a schus that could prevent and delay her death. Now, it's interesting that the Meiri adds another dimension to Ben Azai. Why is Ben Azai so eager? Shazchus Tolala. I mean, after all, we're talking about a case where she's guilty. Says the Meiri, because what's necessary here is to prevent Hotzas Laz Halamayim. People are going to say, you know what, this water is meaningless. The whole thing is bunk. So therefore, Ben Azai is very eager to have the public know that she has a schus, that she studied Torah, and that's why the Mayim did not destroy her body, but not to think or to entertain the idea that the Mayim are ineffective. However, now we get to the two Tanoim in our Mishnah that reject Ben Azai. Rabbi Lazar, number one, Omer, Kol Malav is Bito Torah. And here you have a girsa, Ki'ilu Lomda or Malamda Tiflus. And the Meiri takes out the word Ki'ilu, because the Gemara later on apparently is going to take Tiflus literally and is going to ask, why is this Tiflus? Obviously, the Gemara did not have the girsa Ki'ilu. Now, what is this business about teaching Torah as Tiflus? Why is it called Tiflus? In fact, we know that there were certain great women in Jewish history who did study Torah, amongst them even Bruria, the wife of Rabbi Meir. The Maharil is of the opinion that Rabbi Meir accepted the Shita of Ben Azai that a woman should be taught Torah, and hence his wife Bruria studied Torah. Now, what happens with this Tiflus business? Rashi in Masechet Pesachim Tzadi Aleph explains that Tiflus means Avera. And what it means is that somehow the Torah that she studies is going to give her some sort of armimius. Armimius means some sort of a conniving and cunning. And she's going to be able to do averos b'tzina and get away with it. And this apparently is based on a Gemara later on that darshans a pasuk in Mishlei, Ani chachma shachanti arma. Kevan shenichnasa chachma ba'adam nichnasa imo armumis. So studying chachma, which we think is a great thing, also has a dangerous downside to it. Now the Rambam, at the end of Perek Aleph Milchas Talmud Torah, differentiates between Torah Shebechsav and Torah Shebal Peh. And he says that Torah Shebechsav, although we shouldn't teach her lechatchila, but if she studies Torah Shebechsav, it's not considered tiflus. But Torah Shebal Peh has that extra armimius to it, which could be dangerous. Now, some of the poskim claim that this whole sugya only applies in their times, when people lived with their parents and grandparents, and they had a very strong tradition and upbringing, lisnaig b'derech avosov, shal avicha v'yagedcha. and therefore she should rely on what she saw from her ancestors. But today, that the whole Kabbalah Sa'avos is weak, therefore we should be teaching the women Torah. And this has to do with Sarah Schneer and the Chafetz Chaim, that felt that in our time already we have to change the approach and the attitude towards women studying Torah. Rabbi Yeshua Merotza Isha Bakav V'Tiflus Mitisha Kavim Uprishus. A woman would rather have a kav, which is a very limited amount of food to eat, which would mean that her husband would not go out to work, but rather he would stay home and help her raise the children. And she prefers that to a husband who's so dedicated to his work that he brings home nine times the amount of food, meaning the dough is there, but precious, but she cannot have enough intimacy with her husband. And therefore, says Rabbi Yeshua, it's not a good idea that she should study Torah. Lefisha tilmad es haTorah im hatiflus shalah. So in other words, Rabbi Yeshua is saying that a woman doesn't have the propensity, the characteristics of studying Torah properly. We should therefore not teach her Torah. Now, obviously, if we were learning this be'iyun, we'd have to spend who knows how much time on this whole sugya. Now the Mishnah quotes Rabbi Yeshua in a different context, a different vein. Huya ya'omer chasid shota v'rosha arum v'isha prusha umakos prushim harei elu mevali olam. These are all people who try to show themselves publicly as being chasidim. Like, for example, a chassid who's really a shota. So he will not jump into the water to save a woman who's drowning because he's going to say it's not derech eretz to save a woman. That's a chassid shota. A rasha arum is someone who causes damages to others for his own purposes, but he presents himself as being a chassid. Why? He's makdim, and he gives an explanation to the judges, before the other Baal Din comes in to judge, and Misha niftechu b'leiv hadayan, and the dayan already hears what that Rasha says, and it makes an impact. That's a dvar arma. That's called Rasha arum. And this is a violation of an Isur based on Shmos Chav Gimel Otisa Shema Shav, which the Gemara later on will explain that lav is violated when one of the Baalei Dinim is makdim and he whispers his taina into the ears of the dayan. And ostensibly, he presents himself as being a good guy. I have truthful claims. And what is this case of an Isha Prusha? She shows herself to be a Chasida and a Prusha, and she's really just fooling the world. Now, here we have to introduce a concept in the name of the Meiri of Kishuf, of sorcery. And what is she going to say? She's going to say that, a woman who's, let's say, ill, she's going to say, I'm going to pray on your behalf. When in truth, it's just the opposite. She's making kshafim, these sorceries, that causes a woman, through that sorcery, not to be able to become pregnant and not to be able to give birth. But when the woman is about to give birth, then this machshefa fools everybody by saying, I'm going to pray on your behalf. Maybe God will accept my prayer. And then she destroys her kishuf. So all this is an exercise in trying to fool people when she's really a machshefa and to show herself off as a chasida. And then we have makos prushim, and these are people who fast and roll in the snow, and they beat themselves up, and they try to show what chasidim they are. And really, all this precious is only a fake. It's only a facade. They don't have the right kavanos. So they beat themselves up in order to show themselves to be like humble people, and really in truth they are ma'avalia olam. Amar Rabbi Yehuda Mishmul Mishum Rabbi Meir Kshayisi Lomad Toretz Rabbi Akiva. So according to this transmission of Rabbi Yehuda, the name of Shmuel, Rabbi Meir's first Rebbe was Rabbi Akiva. Hayisi Metil Kankantum Litoch Hadio. Kankantum is a substance, a sam, a kind of a chemical substance, shetzovim bo min olim shchorim, that are used in black shoe polish. Now, I didn't get a chance, although I had it in mind, to look up the English translation of kankantum. I don't have access here to an art scroll. Let me just take a look, unless you have an English translation. 1 second. Let me just see if I can find this. I don't want to waste too much time because today's daf requires a couple of hours, but let's see, kankantum. So it's kuf nun kuf, am I right? Let me just see how to get it spelled right. Kuf nun kuf. Okay, this is not going to help me very much. vitriol, vitriol. And he has another word here which doesn't help me at all, verdigris. Okay, so I don't know exactly what this chemical is. But apparently this chemical makes the dio long-lasting, and therefore Rabbi Meir testifies Rabbi Akiva encouraged him, and Rabbi Meir, we'll see, was writing Sfarim to use kankantum in the mixture of the dio. In other words, from the fact that Rabbi Meir allowed this to go on, he was machshir even kankantum b'toch dio. But later on, Rabbi Meir went to study Torah at the feet of Rabbi Yishmael. And the Gemara is going to explain later on that Rabbi Meir couldn't understand Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva was too profound for him. So he went to Rabbi Yishmael to study by Rabbi Yishmael. And Amar li b'ni ma malachtacha, what do you, Amar lo lavlot, I'm a sofer. I write stam. Amar li b'ni havi zoyer shemalachtacha meleches shamayim. Everyone is going to depend upon your sfarim and your tefillin and your mezuzahs. And shema tachsir os achas. Maybe you'll leave out one letter. Otatir os achas. So maybe you'll add one letter that shouldn't be written. Like, for example, in the pasuk in Yirmiyah Perek Yud, Vashem Elokim Emes. And if you leave out the letter Aleph of Emes, Chas v'Shalom, it's going to say Mace. Or in Breishis Bar Elokim, if you add a Vav accidentally, Breishis Bar O Elokim, it sounds like Breishis created Elokim. Nimtzeis ato machrives kol olam kula. And amongst the 7 categories of individuals in Avos Rav Nosson who have forfeited their share in Olam Haba, one of them is a lavlar, a sofer. Amarti lo, but Rabbi Meir wanted to calm down Rabbi Shmuel, and he said to him, Dover echad yeshli shani matil sochat yov kankantum shmo. And he wanted to know whether or not Rabbi Shmuel, like Rabbi Akiva, would give the approval of using kankantum in the dio. Amar li, Rabbi Shmuel said to me, v'chimatilin kankantum l'tochat dio, v'atorah amru umacha. It means that we might have to use that parsha of Sotah for the purpose of Ashkas Sotah. So when you write the Sefer Torah, you have to be careful and guarantee that when you're writing the parsha of Sotah, it could be used for Ashkas Sotah, because it might in fact be used for Ashkas Sotah. And in the parsha of Ashkas Sotah, the Torah says Umacha, that the name of Hashem will be obliterated by the Mayim Amorim. But by adding kankantum into the mixture of the dio, it becomes a ksav shenu yachol limchos. And that's called rishumo nikar ma'od. Somehow the ink penetrates into the cloth in such a way that even after you put the cloth into the water, it will not obliterate the name. And here it says in the Torah, v'kosav es ha'olos ha'ela kohen v'sefer u'macha. So the Gemara now asks, Maika Amarle u'Maika Mahadale. What did Rabbi Shmuel say to Rabbi Meir? And it seems that Rabbi Shmuel was very concerned about warning Rabbi Meir that he should be careful about the ksiva, he shouldn't miss a letter, he shouldn't add a letter. And now all of a sudden, there's a discussion here between Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Shmuel about kankantum. Seems to be a whole different issue. Hachi kamale. Gemara says, this is what Rabbi Meir said to Rabbi Yishmael. Lomi boy, don't ask me about chaseres v'yaseres the baki I know. You don't have to worry about me. I'm an absolute baki. In fact, the Gemara tells us in Megillah Daf Yud Ches that Rabbi Meir, when he went to be Ma'aber the Shana, there was no Megillah, and he wrote a Megillah milibo, just by heart. So you don't have to worry, I'm an expert. In fact, I'll tell you, Rabbi Shmuel, to what extent I'm careful. This Rabbi Meir explaining why, calming down Rabbi Shmuel. Even because I'm afraid of a fly that might land on the top of a dalid, right? A dalid is basically a reish that has a little bit of a coat that comes up. The dilma osi v'yosef atagi the dalid. Maybe he'll land on the tag umachikle, and while the dio is still wet, the fly will take away the dio. Mashvile reish. So even on such a chashash that maybe a fly will land on the tag of the letter dalid and erase that tag, I am very careful about that. And davar echad yeshli shani matil sochat yov, and therefore, how do I avoid a situation where the zvuv might take away the kotzel shel dalid? Kankantum shmo, I put this kankantum in the mixture, and therefore, I don't allow for dio that could be subject to mechika. And this is what Rabbi Meir was saying to Rabbi Shmuel to calm down Rabbi Shmuel about and guarantee that the Sefer Torah will be kosher. You see how careful we are because we add kankantum to avoid a case of a zuv. And on that, Rabbi Shmuel responded, no, you're doing the wrong thing because you have to write the parsha of Sotah in a way that it should lend itself to mechika. Now the Gemara asks a stira between two statements of Rabbi Meir. Eini, is it really true that this is what Rabbi Meir said? That he would be in favor of and advocate that we add kankantum into the dio? For Sanya, we have a brayso from Rabbi Meir. Shayisi Lavi Torah Rabbi Shmuel. Now this is very strange. Here initially Rabbi Meir started as a Talmud of Rabbi Shmuel, not the way we saw in the previous brisa. I'm sorry, in the statement of Shmuel that Rabbi Meir's original Rebbe was Rabbi Akiva. This is the same Rabbi Shmuel who is just quoted by Shmuel as saying that you have to leave out the kankantum. Rabbi Akiva, Asra. The same Rabbi Akiva who allowed kankantum in this brisa is recorded as objecting to kankantum. Asra. Kasha shimush hashimush. So the sequence of Rabbi Meir's Rebbe and so forth is one stira. And secondly, kasha asara. Which of his rebbeim prohibited the admixture of kankantum? Was it Rabbi Shmuel or Rabbi Akiva? We have a stira between the two. Bishlei Meshimush Hashimush Lo Kasha Meikara Asal Kami de Rabbi Akiva Kevin de Lamotzi Kama Libe Asal Kami de Rabbi Shmuel V'Gomer Gemara Hadar Asal Kami de Rabbi Akiva and Savar Svara. So your problem about exactly who Rabbi Meir and when he learned Torah from whom, that's not a stira. Einochinami. Initially, Rabbi Meir went to study Torah under the tutelage of Rabbi Akiva, but he realized that he cannot understand the depths of Rabbi Akiva, and he would say what Rabbi Meir thought was Tameh, he would say Tar. What is Tar, he'd say Tameh, and he would always show his reasoning for each conclusion that he came to. As the Mishnah later on is going to quote a statement that Mishameis Rabbi Akiva Batal Kavod HaTorah, and Rashi says, what does it mean Batal Kavod HaTorah? Rabbi Akiva was Doresh Kol Kotz V'Kol Shel Kol Os V'Os. And he was Doresh Tevos Yiseros and Osios Yiseros. Bas Ubas. And not only that, Kavod HaTorah was so great in Rabbi Akiva because he knew the Zroei HaTorah, he knew the Omek HaSvara, he knew Lismol Tamei HaTorah Shebal Peh Al Midrashi Mikros. So Asal Kami de Rabbi Shmuel, maybe I'll do better studying at the feet of Rabbi Shmuel. And in fact, he absorbed and soaked up from Rabbi Shmuel Divrei Mishnayis, right? Just kisti masom, and it's as they are. In other words, Rabbi Shmuel passed on a tradition from his Rebbe, who heard it from his Rebbe, etc., etc. And at that point in time, after Rabbi Meir studied and absorbed the Torah of Rabbi Shmuel, he became a baki in the Mishnayos. Hadar Asal Kami de Rabbi Akiva. Now that he knew the Mishnayos, he was ready for the Savar Svara to understand the Tamei HaMishnayos, the depths of the Mishnayos, from whence did they derive the conclusions and the rulings that are presented in the Mishnayos, and how do you equate, by analogy, one Mishnah with another Mishnah. All this he studied with Rabbi Akiva, but on the second round. Hello, but still, Asor Kasha, and the Gemara says Kasha. So we don't have an answer, and the Gemara doesn't even suggest or attempt an answer as to how we b'yashev, which of the two Tanoim, Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Shmuel, actually approved of kankantum and which disapproved. Tanya, Rabbi Yudah Omer Omer Hayu Rabbi Meir Lakol Matilan Kankantum L'Toch Hadyo. When you're writing Sifrei Torah or Tefillin or Mezuzahs, you can add kankantum into the dyo.